Right, I got some great questions this week. We are all in different places of our understanding of the hero's journey and how Take Off Your Pants works the hero's journey into a structure. So if some of this feels like, oh, my head is going to explode, then come back to it later. Don't worry about it. We are going to be writing together for 6 months. I am going to be giving you feedback on your pages every single time you turn pages in. You're going to learn all this stuff. So don't freak out if this doesn't make sense to you yet. But there are some people who are understanding what goal attack thwart means and how it works and how it increases the tension and how it pushes the character further and further into the terrible place that they never wanted to go because of their misbelief. And some of the questions that I'm seeing there have to do with ticking clocks and pacing, although the question wasn't written as a pacing question, it is about pacing. So we're going to split these things out. One of the reasons that it's so great to study the hero's journey with post-apoc is because we have got a built-in antagonist. So I have encouraged you, that's English for told you to do something, I have encouraged you to have a human antagonist as well as the big bad boom that we've got going on. But you have characters who are under pressure all the time because of this apocalyptic event that has happened. And so you're going to see them struggle. It's absolutely built in. This is why the genre won't die. This is why book sales are good, because the conflict is front and center and the stakes are so high. The stakes are end of the world. End of the world stakes. Doesn't get any higher than that. In some of the series, so we've got 5 series. In some of the series, you can see what kind of pressure the apocalypse is bringing on the characters, and you can see an inherent ticking clock. So in my team's story, for example, these mutant cicadas are eating everything. They have mutated in a way that they don't just eat bark and sap anymore. Now they eat crops and they behave like locusts, and there are going to be food chain collapses, and they are poisonous to the touch. And then, of course, later on we aerosolize that and make it airborne so that if it gets in your mucous membranes, you're pretty much done for. And so built into that, there is a ticking clock. If we do not find a way to stop these insects, humanity will be wiped off the face of the earth. Ticking clock. The team that I talked about earlier today, who have got this algae that is growing in the waterways, again, they have got an inbuilt ticking clock. If the oceans collapse, if you've done any research into this, if the oceans collapse, we're done. That's us done because of the ricochet through the food chains. Then Team Tef have got this toxic grass that is spread by fire and is being wildly spread across the United States, and it's killing people, and they have to stop it or humanity will be wiped out. Team Fracking Awesome. It's a bit more complicated because they have got fracking that goes terribly wrong through a series of mines. And we never know quite which mine is going to go up. But what we do know is there's a chain reaction that has been set in motion by this additive that has been added to the fracking compound that is making everything go kablooey. And so methane is being released into the air and it's killing things off locally. So there are local die-offs and maybe food chain collapses. But what we want to see is we want to see that continue to escalate and keep going, and there being sinkholes and the ground collapsing under your feet. And so they have got episodic ticking clocks. The most difficult one is Team Vent, because Team Vent have an explosion that is at a rift line, which causes this massive interconnected series of volcanic eruptions and earthquakes. So there's the domino effect, but we never know where it's going to pop up. And that's really hard to write around and really exciting because we never know where it's going to come up. And the question came from one of those writers in Team Vent about what do we do about the ticking clock? Because you can see that their ticking clock isn't the same as the cicada's ticking clock, right? Because it could happen just about anywhere, and everybody is running for their lives. So the next thing to think about is to drill down into your characters and give your characters individualized ticking clocks. So they have got certain goals that they have to meet by a certain time, or terrible thing will happen. Make sure the stakes are really high. So the person who asked me this has migrant children on the run. They were brought over, they had been working in sweatshops. Their parents were told their children would go to wonderful schools, but parents and children were split up. We were following the children, not the adults. And there are so many opportunities for ticking clocks in this scenario, because you've got the main protagonist in that storyline believes that she was, once again, responsible for the death of a younger child, and is desperate to keep her younger brother and younger sister safe. And they have got a wonderful antagonist. Eric is a wonderful antagonist. He's one of the jailers. And he could easily say something about, they're going to kill their parents on X date at X time. There's a whole mix-up with the passports where they didn't remember them, so they have to circle back. So the baddies have to circle back. So the baddies are coming back. The thing is, you can set up a ticking clock around just about any kind of disaster. So, for example, if you injure one of the kids and they've got a gash in their leg, and that starts to become infected, and then the leg blows up, and then, they don't have access to medicine, you can set up a ticking clock for us. You can show how that sepsis is going to get worse and how it could kill the kid, and are they going to amputate, or will they find a doctor, and how are they going to find a doctor, and by when. The important thing with a ticking clock is to set up by when. The other part of your question was, is the ticking clock connected to the misbelief or the goal? And it could be either of those things. So it could be that the ticking clock gets in the way of them achieving their goal. So it could be that they're aiming for something. So in this case, she is aiming to find her parents and reunite everyone. But let's say, for example, that her kid brother gets a huge gash in his leg. Now she can't go looking for her parents. Now she has to go looking for a doctor. And she's got a ticking clock there that takes her away from her goal. And it impacts her misbelief, because you always want everything that is a disaster to your character to be impacting their misbelief. And you can see that any disaster with her kid brother and kid sister would impact her misbelief, because she believes that she's not capable of looking after them, but that it's her duty, right? What was the other part of your question? I think that you can set up personal ticking clocks for her. I think that that can be part of her story, in addition to the bigger story. The bigger story that she hears when she goes to the gas station, she hears things on the news when the news is still working. If Eric is a continuing part of her journey, she can get all kinds of threats from Eric, any kind of threat, any kind of injury, any kind of big event that gets in the way of her getting to her parents. You can create ticking clocks out of those things. So I think you're in really good shape, even though you don't have the same overall threat profile that some of the other teams do. You still have a lot that you can do in there. Let me just, so pacing, yes. So one of the things that you're asking about is whether or not you were asking about option exclusion, right? So each time your character faces some kind of attack and falls back, they're thwarted in some way, you want the options that they've got to be getting narrower and narrower and narrower. So in the beginning, there are lots of choices where to go to look for Mama and Papa. And as Eric chases them, and as they find or don't find the passports, somebody does or doesn't get injured, they do or don't find Mama and Papa, how they get to safety must become more and more imperiled. And the fewer choices you have until the moment when the ally attacks at the absolute bottom moment of that journey. And that would be in the final book, not in the first book, because this is the overcome moment. When the ally attacks in that moment, there are no choices left. The only choice is to overcome that misbelief and go for it. And in her case, she will succeed. So I hope that answered your question. It was quite specific. I hope it's useful for somebody else as well, because often it's quite useful to hear about other people's stories. But this was about ticking clocks again and a little bit about option exclusion. But shoot me more questions if that's too rambly, and I will do my best to answer them.